Welcome everyone to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. We're sticking with the single topic format for the foreseeable future. I like it. Gives us a little bit of a unique vibe per episode that isn't so dated. We may sprinkle in some commonality with the week that we do it, like it's Survivor Series week 2024. The card is depressing. I remember when pro wrestling cards had more than 5 matches. Not with Triple H in charge. Now we get 2 of the same thing on every card. Yay! It's almost like he never learned not to be repetitive. Go figure. I'm your host as always, Chad Porto. Joining me is the glorious one himself, Marcus Green. Marcus, how are you?
Good man. Last show before Big Turkey Day.
Yes, it is. Thanksgiving is around the corner, and we're going to talk about one of the things we're most thankful for: pro wrestling.
Hey,
The topic of conversation came up because of a comment made on Twitter that I thought was interesting. The WWE is big fans of revisionist history. Big fans. They like to get to the point where the things they say cannot be challenged because they are the worldwide leader in sports and entertainment. That's an old catchphrase. So they publish this image, and everyone's like, yeah, I totally remember this. This was the bestest. And there are people in the comments like, yeah, Kane, Undertaker, Stone Cold, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Mankind, The Rock. Those are definitely the biggest stars of the Attitude Era. There's a problem, though. Besides a terribly edited photo that was actually published by the WWE, this is an image of 6 men from 1997 and 1 man from 2000, being The Rock. And it's supposed to conflate the idea that these were the 7 men that led the 90s of WWE, but that's not true. Mankind, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, The Undertaker, Stone Cold, Kane. This was all what they wore in 1997. The Rock, probably 2000, maybe 2001. So clearly the idea, Marcus, is that these 7 men in 1997, since they're all using the same dated attire, were the big bad boys of the year. But the funny thing is The Rock really only was a big bad player for about 3 years. From maybe late 98 to about 2001 was really his
yeah,
entire window of a top guy. Now, he was still a top guy in 2002 and 2003, but he was a part-timer then.
yeah. It's that note gets real conflated because it just like we got so much of him in that period. It feels longer than it actually was.
Yeah. So the idea that he was where he was is a little bit of a misnomer. So this is on screen right now. You're looking at the PWI 500 list via Pro Wrestling Fandom, and as you can see, The Rock was ranked 103 out of 500 wrestlers of 1997, and that puts him at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16th. He's 16th in the WWE. The
Wasn't he in the Nation in
Patriot.
'97?
What's that?
Yeah. Wasn't he in the Nation? Correct
Yes,
me
he
if I'm
was.
wrong.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
He was either just entering it or had been in it in some time. He's 16th on the top 500 among wrestlers from the WWF. So we're going to dispel some rumors about 97 because apparently that it needs to be done. First and foremost, Austin, shockingly enough, didn't even realize this myself, top rated WWF wrestler. He was number 3 on the top 500. First WWF wrestler. The very first person, though, one Dean Malenko. He beats out Mitsuhara Misawa and Steve Austin and DDP and Lex Luger as your top 5. The Undertaker comes in number 6. Owen Hart, third ranked WWF wrestler, number 16. Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, British Bulldog. A controversial choice, Triple H at number 31. Then Ken Shamrock, Goldust, Farouk, Vader, Sid Vicious, Mankind, Ahmed Johnson, Here, I'll even put this up so everyone can see. Ahmed Johnson, the Patriot, Rocky Maivia. So this whole image right here, bullshit, complete bullshit. And we'll go through a little bit why. One, if we're talking about the stars of the Attitude Era, Shawn Michaels not even in it. His loss at WrestleMania is seen as the de facto start of the Attitude Era, and he wouldn't wrestle again for 4 years. He wouldn't literally wrestle until the Ruthless Aggression Era. Shawn Michaels technically had zero matches during the Attitude Era. He had a bunch of appearances, like he was the commissioner. He popped up a few times as a special guest referee, both as a heel, as a face. Had one of the best segments in Raw history where he showed up on the Titantron in Houston, Texas,
Yeah,
and then had the security guard strip, and then he ended up being one of the security guards. It was great, but he never
yeah.
wrestled in the Attitude Era.
That's so interesting because he really does come up a lot looking back on this because I'm doing research for the show and I'm like I really didn't I don't think I have any early memories of watching wrestling until like during the time when The Rock had got hot. Um, because I don't remember none of this stuff primarily. And you talk about Sean, I think we talked about this before. He really is like the Undertaker, and like it's kind of like a tale of two careers in a sense, like what he did in those early '90s, and then when he came back after, I guess he kind of found religion, and then the back half of his career in the 2000s and up until he retired, and then the same with Taker when he re-debuted as what the Dead Man back in what that was '04 against his brother,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of that career. So it's like it's real interesting that they put Sean in that thing because let's see, he had the title, then he had injuries back and forth, then there was that time where he went off into those promos that you really damn near can't air now. Then it was DX, and then eventually I guess that led up to what that beef with Triple H when he had came back.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
So some people are saying that the scratch logo debut, which was in November of 1997, was the official debut of the Attitude Era. Not everyone agrees with that. I don't agree with that. The Attitude Era wasn't just a new logo with the word attitude below it. It was the start of a brand new generation, which, in my opinion and many others, was the night after WrestleMania 14. When we talk about other guys on this list, first and foremost, Kane. Kane didn't debut until I think it was October of '97. So this idea that Kane was this big presence in '97, which is again what the image is trying to conflate to you, because Mankind, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Stone Cold, and Kane are all in the gear that they wore in 1997, famously. Kane was a nothing in 1997. I don't even think he qualified for the PWI 500. Let's see, maybe as one of his alter egos.
he had a
Nope.
great debut in '97, but he was just technically just stalking his brother.
Yeah, great debut, like fantastic. Like
Yeah,
we can absolutely admit that it was a fantastic debut.
yeah,
But when you look at the historical ranks of 1997, I don't think you can sit here and say with any true decisiveness that he did anything in that year that would, make him a guy that would quite honestly be seen as a legend from that year. He was not impactful in that year by any way, shape, or form. In 1997, he wrestled 56 matches. I'm trying to think of trying to see how many of them were in the WWE. He wrestled as the Fake Diesel. Maybe the Fake Diesel will be on the PWI 500. Let's
yeah.
find out.
I was gonna ask, wasn't he coming off like a dentist gimmick
Yeah, he
before
was.
that?
So Fake Diesel too was at 175 on the PWI 500, which is an embarrassment for this promotion for PWI 500. Like, how dare you? And then he would make his debut as Kane in a house show against Vader. He wrestled Vader twice before facing off with Mankind on television for the first time at Survivor Series 1997. So he didn't even have his first match on television until November of 1997, not counting his time as fake Diesel. So this idea that he was some stalwart in 97, not true. Taker was, Taker was number three. Was number two out of the WWF wrestlers on the list. Not surprising. Michaels he was number four. What you don't see though are some of the biggest names, which are of course Bret Hart, who is right here. We have the British Bulldog, where is maybe it's Davy Boy, Devon Storm, or maybe it's the British Bulldog. Why is British Bulldog not on this list? Where is he? I know he's here somewhere. There's Owen Hart. He was on the list as well. He was number 16 on the PWI 500 and probably number 3 against the WWF overall. But I don't see him on the WWF roster page. There he is. The British Bulldog. That's where he is. He's right next to Bret Hart. By the by, SmackDown Hotel is one of the best websites going. I love it. It's so good. So Owen, Bret, Bulldog. They are your third, fifth, and sixth WWE wrestlers on the PWI 500, and they are nowhere to be seen. That's not surprising, though. There's a lot of historical significance there. While Bret and the WWF have, made amends at times, Bret is still very frosty with the WWF. He's not very close with Triple H at all, and he still really isn't that close with Shawn Michaels, if at all. He's not exactly happy with the way Owen's widow has handled Owen's post-death presence in wrestling. He's made some comments about how he doesn't enjoy what she's been doing, but I think that's really all it's been about with him there. But Owen's widow refuses to let him into the Hall of Fame, which I think Bret Hart is not a fan of. I think Bret wants his brother in the Hall of Fame. Owen's widow doesn't want him to associate at all with the company. So Bret Hart's icy relationship with the company, plus Triple H's new leadership, and I guess we can call it revisionist history, very much in control here, plus the combination of Owen's widow, it makes sense why Bret and Owen are not in this list, because they were two of the biggest names, two of the biggest factors in this company in 97 when this image was supposed to be elicited and taken from. The one that does surprise me is British Bulldog. His son's wrestled for them. His son is currently the All Japan Triple Crown champion at the moment. You would think that maybe the Bulldog would get some love in here, but yet, we see none of the three biggest Hearts or Hart Dynasty members of 1997 in this image. Marcus, when you were doing your research, did you find that shocking that those three names wouldn't be involved in this image, which is supposed to elicit, the start of the Attitude Era?
Yeah, because Owen has such a rounding reputation, and a lot of times he gets kind of overlooked because of just for whatever final reason. But I think didn't he team with British Bulldog and they got the titles for a brief time?
I think so.
So that was that and but Brett, I mean, wasn't '97 like the final toll of everything when it all went down? Like he had a run, was still very hot, but then that was also what the year the screw job
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot. So it's between and it was that also the year that we lost Owen.
No, we lost Owen in '99.
Okay,
Bret,
okay,
Bulldog, and Neidhart left in '97. Owen wasn't allowed to leave, and Owen ended up doing the stunt in May of '99 that killed him. Brian Pillman, who was hurt for a lot in '97, so he probably isn't on the PWI top 500 for the year, died in '97. And he was a
yes,
member of the Hart Foundation as well.
I don't know if they letting a lot of that back half of '97 taint the overall work that those guys did and put in, but it shouldn't. Brought on his, royalty. The whole family is royalty. And yeah, that's surprising because there's no lame ducks in the Hart family.
No.
So you know, so yeah, that is surprising. But again, WWE has selective memory when it comes to things that they want to promote and things they want to disappear, and the loyalists I guess do as well. So
So when I look at the image, no Brett, no Bulldog. I get why those three aren't involved. Bulldog has a pretty turbulent history, elicits a lot of bad memories. You know, his biggest match in WWE, he was high on something. I think it was heroin. It could have been crack. Could have been cocaine. Brett said he was high off his ass. I forget what it was. But of the names, because there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Of the seven men who should be on this photo, three make sense that they're not. Brett, Owen, and Bulldog. The eighth person of the top WWF wrestlers on the PWI 500 should have been on here, especially because of his significance, not just within the company, but in the broader world of the pro fighting sphere as a whole, and that's Ken Shamrock. He debuted, I think it was either late '96 or early '97, because he was the special guest referee for Stone Cold and Bret Hart at WrestleMania. And then he wrestled for most of the year, and then he actually, I think, headlined a few shows, one of which against Shawn Michaels at the end of '97. And yet he's nowhere to be found, which isn't surprising because there was a lot of animosity between Shawn and Triple H and Ken during that time period. Though I don't know how much of that was real and how much of that was just, dirt sheet tabloids. But Ken came in as one of the most prolific mixed martial artists of his era. He had like something like 30 wins, most of which by submission. And he was transitioning from a world of UFC and pancrase to the WWF after had already being a pro wrestler in the late 80s and early 90s. So he had tons of experience in pro wrestling, and yet, despite his impact on the era and on the sport itself, he's nowhere to be seen. And I find that to be very shocking. But again, this is WWE revisionist history, so it's not completely shocking. But Shamrock should absolutely be on board with this image, especially if we're trying to depict a specific year, which I do believe they're trying to do, considering everyone but The Rock is rocking that look from that year.
yeah, what impact, if any, did you got Jared have in that period?
So Jarrett was highly impactful, but in WCW.
Gotcha.
We were talking about it a little off here because I knew Jeff Jarrett jumped to the WWF in '97, but it looks like he jumped pretty late. And for the same reason why I wouldn't consider Kane to be a guy who should be on this poster for that year, I don't consider Jarrett to be in the same regards. However, that being said, uh, considering what their career looked like, I would say Jeff Jarrett was a much more impactful wrestler than Kane. Outside of 2 or 3 years, Kane really was never really used well. He didn't have a lot of great matches, and he became kind of like the de facto big guy in a battle royal. Like, oh, are they going to be able to throw him out of the ring? Of course they are. That's the gimmick every time you do one of these, and he always gets thrown out. And that became Kane. Oh, can they stop Kane? Of course they're going to stop Kane. Kane exists now only to
So
get beaten.
so they didn't start that most elimination thing until later with him.
Yeah, Kane, I think that was 2001 where
Mm.
Kane got the most eliminations. And then, like, heading into 2002, he kind of tapered off, and I think that was the year he lost his mask, too. Or maybe in 2000. No, it was 2003 he lost his
No,
mask.
yes, yeah, because he was that was wasn't that during the time he was teaming with RVD?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. What a stupid fucking tag team. Ugh, the booking in this company has been historically terrible.
but speaking of monsters, because I was like I said, I don't really have any memories of this particular era, but obviously you do, and I was reading obviously people was listing off stuff. And somebody said like that might have been Undertaker's most successful year, particularly as a world champion. What was your take? I wanted to get your take on that.
This is going to sound bitter, I've never thought The Undertaker was a good worker.
Mm,
I think he's had his moments. And I think if you put him with the right dance partner, he looks really fucking good. When he wrestled Batista at WrestleMania, that was fantastic.
Sean, Sean Angle. That's an underrated match.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think when you look at Batista, I think he's easily one of the five best big men of all time.
Absolutely.
And maybe one of the, and this sounds like an insult, but there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of wrestlers. So when I say this, it's not intended to be an insult, but like factor in all sorts of wrestlers, all sorts of types, all sorts of personalities, all sorts of anything. I think Batista's a top 150, top 100 wrestler, period. And considering the dude's prime was 3 years, I think that's
Yeah.
impressive. But when you think about The Undertaker, like his matches with Sid sucked. Sid was a good worker. He wasn't great, but he was good. His match with Sid sucked. His matches with Mankind were brawls because he couldn't really do anything with them because Taker was so limited. Anything before 97 was ass. He never had a good match before, I don't know, maybe 96, 97. Most of his matches were pretty garbage. Now you could say, well, yeah, he was wrestling Jimmy Snuka, and he was wrestling Giant Gonzalez, and he was wrestling Brian Lee, who was the fake Undertaker. All that's fair. But even when he wasn't wrestling them, there's no match that goes, did you see him on, Shotgun Saturday Night, or did you see him on Superstars, or did you see him, on the third week of Raw? He had this really great match with so and so. You don't ever hear that. It's not until like 97, 98 when he starts getting better workers like Shawn Michaels, like Mankind, like, Stone Cold, The Rock. That's when you start to really get a lot of good matches out of him. Even his two most heralded, rivalries outside of Shawn Michaels, Mankind, Triple H and Kane, none of their matches were ever good. I can't
Mm,
point to one match with Kane where I'm like, you know what? If I had to come up a list of 500 greatest matches, none of his matches with Kane would make it. They just weren't that good. They were story driven and they were interesting because like, oh, can the Undertaker? But then he beats Kane, and then Kane loses
yeah.
all his credibility because like, what's the fucking point? Like, why wouldn't you put Kane over on Undertaker? It made no sense. And his feud with Triple H was even worse. That being said, WrestleMania 28, that Hell in a Cell match, I wouldn't put it in my top 100 match or top 150 match. I may put that in my top 30 matches. It's that good. I think it's phenomenal. But Taker only ever hit those moments rarely. Like you look at Will Ospreay, you look at Josh Alexander, Eddie Edwards, Brian Danielson, Samoa Joe. They were having Kurt Angle. They were having banger after banger after banger to the point where they elevated the bar so high that you sometimes get numb with how good some of their matches are. Taker's bar was so low whenever he had a semi decent match or even a good match, everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest thing I ever saw." It rarely ever was. Hype, manufactured promotion, and having industry plants really help you sell the tale that, Undertaker was this great worker. That being said, if you were to look at his booking, his bell to bell, and his overall image, I think you have a hard time, aside from when the streak became popular in '05 and starting from
Yeah.
there, I think you have a hard time finding a better year he ever had than in '97. But that's not like saying, it was like CM Punk in what was that, 2011?
Mm,
Where he was champion for 400 days into 2013 or something
yeah.
like that.
Somewhat punk. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that level of industry good. It's not Kenny Omega's, or Okada's New Japan title run. It's not even Roman Reigns' run. Even though he and Taker, even though he probably wrestled a third of the matches Taker wrestled in 1 year in '97, as Reigns did for 3 years. But I would say that for The Undertaker, it was probably his most successful year in the ring in terms of production value and consistency. But that's, again, a low bar. Stone Cold, however, is a very interesting tale because this was Stone Cold's last year as a good worker.
Mm,
People like to ignore this. They like to forget about this. The Stone Cold we saw at WrestleMania 13 was not the Stone Cold we would see at WrestleMania 14 or 15 or even going further. Owens botched pile driver. that sit out tombstone that he decided to do ruined him as a worker. And we talk about this all the time. Like you lose so much when you blow out a knee, or when you blow out your back, or when you get a neck fusion. Stone Cold broke his neck, and then wrestled on it for 2 years until he needed surgery in '99. The idea that he would be the best wrestler, at least in terms of viability, marketability, performance, merch, is shocking considering how bad he was as a wrestler in '99 due to his injuries, as opposed to where he was in '97 when he was like winning the Royal Rumble. Because if I remember correctly, he won the Royal Rumble in San Antonio
Yeah.
at the Alamo Dome. So to see him here, it's hilarious because this is the last time, like the last year, he'd actually be a quote unquote good worker, and
Yeah.
he's the top guy in the company at the
That's
time.
that's interesting because you always do greater these breakdowns from your, you know, um, eye test. Like what all were the changes that obviously happened when that injury occurred from your
Mobility
point?
and physical endurance were the two biggest ones. He stopped bumping as much. Most Stone Cold matches were brawls, but in like '98 and '99, especially when he came back like very early in '97, very early in '98, late '97 when he started wrestling again after his broken neck, he would
Yeah.
spend a lot of time brawling around ringside. And then when he'd go inside, he would throw like a clothesline or two, a lot of punches. He would do the corner stomp, which granted was a super over move. Everyone loved the corner stomp.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thesz pressed over there.
Thez press. Sometimes he'd hit like a DDT or a spine buster, but rarely. Then it was Stone Sunner and then pin. Yet when you were watching him against like Ricky Steamboat in what was that '94 before Steamboat had to retire, the dude was doing arm drags. He was doing the Steamboat deep arm drag. He was doing suplexes. He was working submission holds. Like he became a dramatically different wrestler. Now some of that was gimmick oriented, but a lot of it was he simply physically couldn't do all of it anymore. It's why
Yeah.
so many of his matches after like '99 were multi-man matches. Because like physically he just couldn't do it anymore. People like for some reason seem shocked that he only really wrestled as a headliner from 1998 to 2001. He had a 3-year window on top, and that was it. Because by the end of 2001, he had broken down so much they couldn't trust him anymore. He was just physically beaten. And who could blame him? His knees were shot, his neck was shot, his back was shot. He
Yeah.
was, the Mania of WrestleMania. Have you ever seen that documentary?
No.
It's a great documentary. It came out with the special edition of the WrestleMania 20 DVD set. It was supposed to be. There was hopes that it would be a theatrical release, and it never found the traction. But it documents like the 72 hours before WrestleMania 19, and they talk about Rock and Austin, Shawn Michaels and Jericho. They talk to the Undertaker, but not Big Show or A-Train. They talk to Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, and I think maybe a few other guys about their matches. And like Angle's like, I'm worried if it wasn't Brock, I wouldn't be doing this. My neck's so messed up because Kurt famously went and got surgery like 2 days after WrestleMania 19.
Yeah.
Shawn and Jericho talked about the importance of Shawn's first WrestleMania match in 4 years. Triple H and Booker talked a little bit, but not about a lot. Ric Flair talked about how if Brock Lesnar wasn't an amateur wrestler doing neck bridges all day, the bot shooting star probably would have killed him. But the one that's really infamous is Stone Cold. And this is days before he wrestles. And he goes, this whole thing, WWE, the industry, it's a machine. I'm just a cog in the machine. When I get worn up and chewed out, I'll be taken off and replaced, same as everyone else, because I'm just a cog. I'm a big cog. I'm an important cog, but I'm still just a cog. And
Well,
he's like, my back, my neck, I'm having issues. And this is again before the match, and the producer asks him, is this your last match? And Stone Cold's like, yeah, this is my last match. I'm retiring after this match. And then that night, like the night before WrestleMania, he nearly has a heart attack. His blood pressure shoots through the roof. His heart rate hits like 140 or something like that. And he gets rushed to the hospital. And Stone Cold goes, I thought I was in Seattle to die. And then like 18 hours later, he's wrestling The Rock in his finals match. It's ridiculous. But think about, and he wasn't even like he maybe 40 at the time. Like think about like guys nowadays. Like you're retiring before 50. What are you fucked up? Like physically? Like why would you do that? He retired in
Yeah,
2003, and he wasn't even 40 yet. That's how messed up his
yeah,
neck was. He was 39. Like who retires at 39?
yeah. He definitely had some issues. I remember, and maybe I watched not the Mania of WrestleMania, but maybe one of his solo docs where I do remember watching something where JR was on it and talking about how I think he called him when he was on his farm or something. Because I think this is when what didn't something happen when Stone Cold just walked out and he had beef with Vince and they couldn't come to an agreement on something.
Yeah, that was 2002. So that was during King of the Ring. They were at the point where the people who were running the WWF, Vince McMahon and whomever else, were watching Stone Cold Steve Austin not be able to do what they need him to do. And the writing was on the wall, so they wanted him to wrestle Brock Lesnar. Now Stone Cold tells it, he had no problem wrestling Brock, but he wanted to do it on pay per view because it made the most sense. But from everything that I've ever seen, everything I've ever heard, and even some of the people I've ever talked to, they were afraid of putting Stone Cold on pay per view in a singles match with Brock Lesnar because they thought it would suck. And I think his last pay per view match was against The Big Show and Ric Flair, and they had a hard time getting a good match out of him. He physically declined so much, and this isn't like, I hope no one is taking this like I'm thumbing my nose at Stone Cold, like how dare you? Every athlete, every athlete, every athlete declines. It
Yeah.
is just part of the game.
Hmm.
And this is no different. No different whatsoever. Dude should not have been able to go as long as he did following that because he had one of the worst broken necks of all time. Like he was unable to walk under his own strength. Like the fact that he was able to roll up Owen after that pile driver and to pin him,
Yeah.
miracle. I would say there's only been a few broken necks that have been as bad as his. I would say Kurt Angle's was not nearly as bad as Stone Cold's. Because Kurt
Wow, that's
Angle
crazy.
wrestled an entire amateur match and won gold with a broken freaking neck. He tells us all the time. Then he
Yeah,
went on and had a 20-year career in wrestling.
yeah. He had that neck dead into hell though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like, obviously draws. Um,
Yeah.
Sadly, maybe Chris Bay. Hayabusa, the number of people who have had as bad of a broken neck as Stone Cold,
Was
very short list. There's a
was
few others, I'm
was
sure.
did Sorensen have a broken neck or that was a spinal situation?
I think it was a broken neck as well. I think it was compacted spine. I think because like DJZ, Zima Ion, whatever, Joaquin Phoenix, whatever stupid name NXT named him, he hit him on the top of Sorensen's head, and it caused his neck to compress onto his spine, which is very similar, maybe even dramatically so to what happened with Stone Cold, because that's exactly what happened to Stone Cold. But yeah, so when you look at his last pay per view match, where was it? He wrestled at Backlash against The Undertaker, which was a snore of a match. Let's see, where is it? He wrestled the Big Show at Insurrection, which was a snore of a match. Here we go. Judgment Day. He had a 15-minute match against the Ric Flair and Big Show, which was shocking, a snore of a match. Undertaker was pretty good in 2002. He wasn't great. He was good.
You know, it was American Badass.
Yeah. So the Wrestling Observer gave his match against The Undertaker a 2.25 star, while Cage Match viewers gave it 3.28 out of 10. Let's see. Let's jump to Insurrection. They gave his match with the Big Show a 4.89 out of 10. And Judgment Day 2002, they gave Stone Cold versus the Big Show 5.36 out of 10 with 3.25 stars. So think about that. It took Ric Flair and the Big Show taking on Stone Cold to have a somewhat decent match. Do you want to know what his WrestleMania match score is? Stone Cold defeats Scott Hall, and he gets a 4.6 out of 10 from Cage Match. And his Wrestling Observer score is so low they don't even post it. There was a
Yeah, I
time,
mean,
Marcus, sincerely, there was a time when Stone Cold would have great matches. We are far, far, far past that time.
yeah, and it seems to be an underlying common thread between the guys that get touted as being these consistent goats. I'm going to use the word consistent because obviously that's implied with these rankings that like you've been clarifying. Guys like Undertaker and Stone Cold clearly understood the necessity and well, obviously the importance, but the necessity for where they were physically at the time for character work.
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly that player specifically, but Undertaker admits this. I mean, he talks about kind of not liking how fast guys go today. Uh, but so much of his matches was character work, and then because there's the classic thing like when you think you need to slow down, go slower, and then when you think you're going too slow, go slower than that whole deal. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that very much worked for Stone Cold, particularly with the audience, because he was like God's most pissed off employee of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And then Taker had various gimmicks, but I think the American Badass one really popped, and then I think for a lot of years after that, obviously the 2000s, like you said, a lot of his matches came when he had the right opponents. But even so much of his ladder success came from that longevity and the fact that he really was working and getting over with a gimmick that was very much felt like out of time. So uh, yeah, but with Stone Cold, it's like it's always interesting talking about it because he's had so many like up and down things when it comes to the intricacies of what he was doing in terms of working in the in ring, but he was just so over as a character, it almost like the audience allowed it to level out. Whereas opposed to like you said, the company was like, man, we trying to get this young still, but that was 2002, 2003 when The Rock just came in as a freaking on a rocket,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't. I mean, he saw the necessity to put him over because at that point, between his injuries and his frustration, Stone Cold was just done anyway. But the way he wanted to do business versus how the company wanted to do business, that was the whole thing. So, I think a lot of his coming back and forth over the years, along with guys like Goldberg and Brett, has kind of been mending some of those fences as well as kind of like wanting to get a lot of that stuff out of their system. Like essentially, that match with Kevin Owens probably shouldn't have happened. But when you look back and you talk about like his last stints of matches, it's like I'm trying to get some of this sour taste out of my mouth, and I don't know how much that rubbed out for the audience with that match, but people wanted him back just to do anything for so long they probably didn't care. Whereas we looking at it like dad just really didn't need to get into the fight with the other dad at school today. I guess it didn't need to happen, but yeah, that's kind of how it's going. So
And I do agree with you. Like the idea that he needed to wrestle again, I don't agree with, and I didn't think it was a good match. It was the whole match was basically what he was doing for the last year and a half, 2 years of his career anyway, as a full
yeah,
time wrestler. So like it wasn't that far off, but it was also a stark reminder that even at 57, whatever he was, that it wasn't exactly the match that we were used to having with him when we actually watched him in his prime. And the fact that it was so poorly built up to and delivered upon just made it even worse. What I will say though is, if we're going to look at this map honestly, like not this map, but this image honestly of 97 wrestlers, there's four names that should be in consideration. Um, Goldust, Farouk,
Mm.
Vader, and I know this is going to anger some people, Ahmed Johnson. If Mankind, who is 51st overall in the PWI 500 and like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13th. 13th in the PWI 500 among WWE wrestlers. If he's one of the 7 names that you would put in this image, then you have to consider the guys that came in around him. Because Ahmed was 53rd, Mankind was 51st, Vader was 46th, Farouk was 45th, Goldust was 41st. I don't think Goldust is going to make this image only because Goldust, Dustin Rhodes, AEW wrestler. They're not going to promote him. So he's not going to be considered. Farouk, I don't know why he's not in this image unless it's just because they don't think that Farouk had the run that they thought he'd have. He and Mark Merrow were brought in from WCW with the idea that they'd be world champions. Much like Mark Merrow, Farouk fell off, never became that guy, ended up having to become a tag team wrestler to keep his job. Granted, that gave him a nice arc, and he was already pretty well known as a tag team wrestler with Doom in WCW when he was managed by Woman. I think it was Woman. It may have been Sherry Martel. I can't remember. But when you consider Farouk's run as a tag team wrestler, obviously he's one of the greatest of all time, and is running WCW as world champion, sure. But I understand why he wouldn't make the image because 97 was probably his last good year as a singles wrestler. So I get it. What I don't get, though, is the lack of Ahmed Johnson. He was everywhere in 97. He was an Intercontinental champion. He was headlining pay-per-views. He was super over. He had charisma. He had the look. He wasn't a great wrestler. And the dude fell off hard. But we're not looking at legacies. We're looking at historical significance. 97. Who was one of the biggest, most promoted names in the WWF? Ahmed Johnson. Now, did he go on to WCW to be Big T and get fired after 4 months because he was so out of shape? Yeah, absolutely. But in 97, he was the real deal. You could have put the world title on him, and it would have felt right. I don't know if you know much about Ahmed Johnson, Marcus, but in 97, he was that guy. He was the next big thing. He was The Rock before The Rock in terms of like, this was going to be the guy who would feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin in a year and a half. That was kind of how he was being built up. If you had Stone Cold, you had Ahmed. Those were your next 2 headliners.
Mm. Yeah, they don't seem to talk about him much.
No, they don't. He was significant. His presence, his booking, he was significant. If we had to break down, though, who I think the 7 people who best represented 1997 should be, I think they get Undertaker and Stone Cold right. I think that makes sense. I think in the year 97, maybe it makes sense to have Shawn Michaels. He was pretty big on the back half of it, so that makes sense. So I think Shawn, Undertaker, Stone Cold makes sense. After those 3 names, I think you have a lot to work with. I like Mankind. Mankind was ranked 51st in the PWI 500. He was ranked like what, 13th among all WWF wrestlers. So not a obvious person to put into this.
Qu- Quick question with Mankind, real quick. Was he oscillating between his characters, or was he sticking to Mankind on that period?
I don't think it started oscillating. I think he started oscillating in 98.
Gotcha.
Because he did, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 98, because he did the 3 Faces of Foley at the Royal Rumble. He came back as, maybe there was Dude Love in 97. I think he may have done Dude Love in 97. He brought back Cactus Jack in 98 because he won the tag belt with Terry Funk, but he also won the tag belt with Steve Austin, but I think that was in 97 when he was Dude Love. So I think he was oscillating in 97. But I think they're only listing him as one placement. But we can always find out. Let's see. Dude Love. Nope. What about Cactus? Nope. So Mankind is representing all 3 faces of Foley, according to the PWI 500 in 1997. So I don't know if I'd put him here among these 7 names in this year because you have Owen. You have Brett, you have Bulldog, you have Shamrock, you have Goldust, you have Farouk. Vader was a huge player in the WWF around this era. That being said, in '97 he was mostly just feuding with some of the more heavier names like Mankind and Undertaker and what have you. He had a much bigger run in '96 when he was headlining events with Shawn Michaels. So I don't know if I'd put him in there for '97. Sid Vicious left in June, so I don't know if I'd put him there. The Patriot was only there to feud with the Rock, with Bret Hart, so I would not include him at all. I think if my seven, from what I know about the year, the wrestling, and all that, my seven would be Stone Cold, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Ken Shamrock, Goldust, Ahmed Johnson. Those would be my seven. Those were the most seven prominent names that the WWF had in terms of marketing, promotion, main events, significance, presence, whatever you want to qualify and quantify. It would be those seven. It would be Stone Cold, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Shamrock, Goldust, Ahmed Johnson. Those would be my seven. That's just who I think made the most impact in that year. But that's always up for debate. Some can argue Mankind, some could argue Triple H. I don't think you. No one should be arguing Kane and The Rock though. Period. Not '97. Specifically in '97, not those two. I don't know if you feel comfortable picking your seven, but I would be interested to hear who you would involve or include in this image, just from what you know of the year, even if it's not all seven, just like a name or two that you would replace or you'd want to see.
Let's see. In terms of this image, I'm definitely keeping the, much like you with the, Stone Cold, Shawn and Brett.
Okay.
Uh, I definitely think you got to throw Mankind in there because he was so significant with that character. Um, so what that's for? Let's see.
Would you keep Taker?
Yeah, I keep Taker. 'Cause like you said, the year he had, and I don't like you said these images are pretty much accurate to what they look like in '97.
Yeah, save for The Rock.
Uh, yeah, they for the Rock. So yes, five. But I got two more. Um, I'm gonna be like you and throw Shamrock in that because I agree with the whole thing with Shamrock. I feel like I think we talked about this before. Shamrock's kind of ahead of his time
Mm-hmm.
because obviously that style and everything has been far more popularized. We see so many wrestlers with mixed martial arts backgrounds and whatnot, and then crossover now. So Rock was ahead of his time in that regard. And lastly, trying to see if I want. It's kind of hard not to mention Ahmed because I feel like he's like you said he was significant, but they damn near treat him like I was finna say LoJack, but I'm talking about you know who I'm talking about, Jack, the one who passed away. Who am I thinking about with WCW? Uh,
I don't know who you're talking about.
the,
LoJack?
the, the not his name not LoJack. The guy that was hurting a bunch of people, black guy, passed away.
Ahmed Johnson?
Not not Ahmed Johnson. Why am I thinking about?
Virgil. Stevie Richards. Not Stevie Richards. Stevie Ray. There was Ice Train.
New Jack.
New Jack. Oh, ECW.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, ECW. Yeah, they treat him like he's New Jack or something. Um, I'm also because I think I saw some stuff with him going through some document. I think on the last thing, because like I said, I did I may have went over my head, but I know this guy specifically. You brought him up. I think I might give my last slot to Sid.
Okay. He did have a big 97, headlined at WrestleMania. He ran through the summer and really did help put over guys on his way out. So that makes sense. So your seven would be Stone Cold, Shawn, Mankind, Sid, Shamrock, Brett,
And Taker.
and Taker. That's fair. That's a fair seven. I do want to say that even though neither of us picked Triple H, as a wrestler, he was arguably top five in ring for the company at the time. That's not a ballyhoo kind of notification. It's like, oh my God, you're the top five. The WWF had really shitty workers in '97. But he
Ah,
was
yes.
a sidekick to Shawn. He was not a star. I think he may have won the Intercontinental title, but he wasn't. It was kind of like when Zack Ryder won the Intercontinental title. Nobody saw it as like a step up for him. They're like, oh, good for you. Here's a pat on the head. Because I think he was supposed to win the King of the Ring in '96. I think he won it in '97. So there is
Yep.
some substantialness to putting him on this list, but I do think that because he was basically Sean's lackey, and
Gotcha.
because he was kind of feuding with some of the lesser known guys and like lesser promoted guys like Owen, Rocky Maivia, and all them, I can't give him a slot on the top seven because he wasn't promoted as a top seven guy.
Gotcha. So this before the full on game persona
Oh yeah, the game
and
wasn't until
everything.
'99.
Gotcha. So that was yeah, that's fair. It was good to hear that though. Because he's always got this reputation as what not the guy, but the guy who worked with the guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting.
All right, so that takes us about to the end of the show. Any other pieces of things you want to touch on before we head off?
Uh like speaking of people with injured necks, and then I think you brought his name. But do we have any updates on Chris Bay?
No, and that worries me. I know
Yeah,
TNA is handling their is handling his medical bills, and
that's
everyone's
good.
raising money for his post medical, his post hospital release, so that he can
Yeah,
like afford rent and or his mortgage or what have you, and food and what have you. But from the lack of conversations, it worries me that this is far more serious than people seem to want to accept. I don't
yeah,
know if we're talking like draws levels of issues here or if it's more along the lines of like Jesse Sorensen, but the lack of any information, the fact that he's still in the hospital,
yeah,
is greatly concerning. I'm afraid he'll never wrestle again. I'm more afraid that he won't ever be able to walk again, but I'm going to be optimistic that he can get to that point again. But I think his in ring career is over. If he's even somewhat mobile, I think
yeah,
I think if he can walk, if like even if he needs a cane or what have you, I think he could still be a great manager. I think he could be a great color commentator. He can still add a lot to the company. I just don't think we'll ever see Chris Bay wrestle in the ring again, which is one of the biggest tragedies of wrestling, at least in modern wrestling, because he had such a bright star and he was so talented and so charismatic. I was telling you, for months, almost maybe even a couple years now, Bay and Austin would have a main event level feud, and that they both had the capabilities of being that guy.
yeah.
So,
I mean, at least we did get that phenomenal tag run that they had and everything, and then this is just us talking, and even with certain things seem like it's kind of writing on the wall because not obviously there's a unanimous commitment to vagueness around this,
mm-hmm,
um, which is cool because you want to see that community stand up for their own, but like the the level of crowdfunding and coming together and around it denotes a more serious thing that like he been significantly hurt and it's going to be a long journey post everything. So like you said, hopefully he just can get to a level of health where he can have a quality of a good quality of life, outside of wrestling. So yeah, but other than that, nothing besides good wishes towards him. Nothing particularly popped up on the radar. Like you said, we'll watch or catch, Survivor Series this weekend in spite of itself. Did you have any takeaways from Full Gear for you?
Not really. I felt a lot of it was telegraphed.
Yeah.
I don't like bashing on AEW because I do think they put on a good product. But like Moxley versus Orange Cassidy, you should only book that match if you're going to put the belt on Orange Cassidy. I don't think Orange Cassidy has the heat to carry a pay per view, especially one that's not as stacked as it could have been. And that was kind of a thought I was having for our next show. What happened to AEW? When did the
Mm,
decline start? And I think maybe
mm,
we should address that next week because I really do think a lot of this stems with losing CM Punk. But I really want to talk about Jack Perry's overinflation as well because I feel like he's only getting pushed to get back at Punk and to try to salvage something from Punk's departure. But Jack Perry isn't good. He isn't entertaining. And I feel like some of the booking decisions they're having
yeah.
is almost compounding on Punk's departure. And they don't need to. So maybe that's what we'll do
Yeah.
for next week. Talk about what the fuck happened with AEW.
Yeah, it definitely it does feel like a night and day pivot from. Look, now obviously WWE didn't lose Punk, but I do think him getting injured with his tricep really derailed a lot of plans that they had an interesting pivot with because even in a recent interview he was like it kind of felt like they turned chicken shit into chicken salad when they did the Drew feud. Obviously, we felt a different way because of how those that certain things were executed with that, but keeping him relevant and keeping him feeling like he was still there even though he couldn't wrestle was a stroke of genius on both sides because obviously Punk is just so polarizing. Just having him on TV does a lot, but at the same time, uh, with AEW, there's so much with him hinged on him being able to wrestle those guys, and now he's like saying like a lot of those guys he kind of wasted matches on,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting and something else we could rope into that conversation. So yeah, it does feel like tale of two cities, both pre and then post punk. But shout out to Danny Garcia who derailed that Billy Goat's gruff. So it's yeah.
We'll talk more about this next week. I think this is a good idea for a topic. For that, we're done. You can find us on the website at realnerdcorp.com, REALNERDCRP.com. We're on Twitter at NERDCRP. You can find us on Twitch and YouTube at The Wrestling Underground, or maybe it's just The Wrestling Underground. I think it might be The Wrestling Underground. Either or, that's where we're at. You can also find us on Twitch and Twitter. Twitter is NERDCRP. Marcus, you can be found on Twitter at Paradox Kid, PARADOXKID.
Yes, me.
You can also find me on Twitter at CHADNERDCORP. That's Chad Nerdcorp on Twitter. Marcus, you have another show. It's called The True Penny Show, TRUEPENNYSHOW. You can find
Yes,
Marcus
sir.
over there. They usually talk about the Japanese promotion GLEAT. They also touch on some other subjects as well. You can check them out at their handle, which is The True Penny Show. They post all the links to their shows on their Twitter account, so check them out there. So we'll be back next Tuesday around the same time to talk more fun with AEW. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy some food. Remember to watch more wrestling. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, as always, to watch more wrestling. And Marcus, take us home.
Good night, me.